Yeah, I think you mentioned loyalty, which obviously is extremely important factor. I would add to that, which is related, is gratitude as well. And I think one of the problems that we have now is, well, first of all, we're importing a lot of people that have absolutely no gratitude whatsoever to the country that they're coming to. You see these videos of immigrants showing up to whatever city and complaining about the accommodations. There was a hearing in New York, and you had immigrants from, I forget which country, but they were complaining that they were not being provided the right accommodations. But then you also find that among natural-born citizens who have this lack of gratitude ingrained in them, instilled in them very explicitly and very intentionally from birth, from the school system, and that's why you get a lot of this. This what really troubles me is this like deep feeling of both guilt among many Americans, especially white Americans, and also resentment towards their own ancestors. We live on stolen land.
All right, so here today we are on the Matt Walsh show, and as you can see, his guest is former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. And they've got off to an interesting start in this honest conversation, as they've dubbed it, where Matt Walsh is talking about gratitude. So gratitude, or lack thereof, shown by immigrants to their adopted country, and even gratitude by native-born citizens, or ingratitude, who seem, many of them, to be brought up with this idea, or seem to have become infected with this idea that well, with a hatred for their own country, which is just bewildering in many ways. Now, I've got plenty of negative things I could say, certainly about the American government, and especially when it comes to various policies, especially foreign policy. But of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that the United States is an empire, and the American empire does what empires do. It runs roughshod over lots of other parts of the world, demands its cut. That's just the way it goes when you got the empire running things. But let's see where they take this conversation. It could be interesting.
Sure. We committed a genocide was committed against the natives, and so on and so forth. Of course, that isn't true. But all of that plays into this, doesn't it? And
totally, absolutely.
What do we do about that? Like that's how do we address that? How do we get people to actually have some real gratitude for the country they live in and everything that's been provided to them and all the people that made that possible for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the way we've got to be looking at this in terms of loyalty and gratitude. I do think that we have a mass illegal migration problem and a mass immigration problem in this country we need to deal with. But I think I'm going to draw an abstract parallel here. I sort of see this amongst folks on the right in the same way that I'll talk to like the Bitcoin crowd or the crypto audiences, where just because you're advocating for a good thing doesn't mean that all problems are going to be solved by that good thing, okay? And so like that's when I talk to many of my pro-Bitcoin friends and largely views that we share in common, I'll say, okay, but this is not going to necessarily automatically solve the problem of whether or not we get involved in foreign wars, right? You're putting too much on the shoulders of this one issue. I'll draw a parallel piece of advice that I give to a lot of my friends on the nationalist right, is that we absolutely need to uncompromisingly go outside the Overton window of the past to do what is required to fix this mass immigration problem in the United States of America, or we won't have a country left. But that alone is not going to be sufficient to revive our own missing national identity, even amongst the people who are native born for generations in this country that also contribute to the complete dissolution of our national identity too. And so you can't get in the business of fetishizing one solution when in fact there's a deeper vacuum of identity and purpose in this country. And the immigration problem is really a symptom rather than just alone a sole cause of that actual problem. So how do we do it? There's not a policy I'm advocating for in any sense, but it's a thought experiment, right? Obviously, you want to seal your border to anybody who's entering this country illegally. Anybody who's coming to this country should know something about the country. Bring the citizenship test up front, even for getting a green card, even getting into the country. You think about actually people who are getting citizenship should have even more civic commitments that they're buying into, maybe financial commitments. That's for the immigrants. But for the people who are already here, a counterpart to that, as a thought experiment, I'm not advocating this as policy, but as opening our minds to the kind of way we should be thinking. If somebody would accept a $75,000 check and leave and renounce their U.S. citizenship and go to another country, and their only condition was they never get to come back, and they would actually take that, I'm not sure that they should be a citizen of this country in the first place, really. I mean, the reality is I think there's many people in the United States of America who are completely agnostic to their citizenship, who view the United States as some type of economic zone that gives them something that they're supposed to be entitled to. So somebody were going to go just as happily to Canada or to England or Western Europe and live a particularly happy life with some startup life investment and to go do it. I don't think that that person is in any sense loyal, in the sense that our founding fathers envisioned a citizen as being loyal to the United States of America. Capital C citizenship is missing. And so should we implement some large mass scale program like that in this country? I don't think that that's practical or advisable, but we have to bring back what citizenship is about. I think we have to revive some sense of civic duty. I go back to, it's not one solution, but it was why one of the policy proposals I did advance in my campaign.
Well, that's kind of a vaguely interesting thought experiment, but not really. I mean, it's completely... I mean, I see what he's saying there. Okay, yeah, if somebody will take a modest or even a decent amount of money to go live in another country and never be allowed to come back, do they even deserve to be in the country in the first place? I don't know. You know, a lot of people would probably take that deal if they could find a country that would take them, of course. I mean, like you said, it's a thought experiment. But on the other hand, he brought up, brought up an interesting point that a lot of people, the pro-immigration crowd, the pro-open borders crowd, the Democrats, etc., it's the United States is a nation of immigrants. Well, no, the first immigrants weren't immigrants at all. They were settlers. They were people who left everything behind, and they really left it behind, and they had to come and make a new life in the new world. Yeah, they had to build from scratch a new life, and it was hard. And they created the country, or they created colonies, and then states, and then a country. And even the people who came not long after them, yeah, they also worked hard. They actually built up what became the colonies and the states and the country. They were not immigrants in the sense of today. Virtually all immigrants today are economic immigrants. They are coming to a fully functioning, fully mature Western country, and they want to get in on the good deal. Can't blame them. Why not? Who wouldn't want to do that? But it's not at all the same thing. Even compared to early 20th century immigration in the United States, late 19th century, early 20th century, when there were some massive waves of immigration, the United States specifically opened its borders for certain groups of people at certain times to do certain things. Yeah. But that was, so it was mass migration, but it was a specific kind of mass migration of specific kinds of people from specific parts of the world for specific purposes for a specific time period. And then the borders were closed again. It was nothing like today. And those people, too, they came often with nothing, but they were invited to come. They said, you can come, and often save for all these Italians who came in the early 20th century. A lot of them, most of them probably very poor, from extremely poor regions of Italy. And they had to make do. They'd arrive in New York and hopefully be met by somebody maybe who sponsored them, or previous family member, or somebody from the church, kind of get them started, slowly moving, getting a foothold. But sure, they weren't settlers like the original arrivals, in the 17th century, but still, they were very much, it was like all or nothing for them. It wasn't just coming to, the country was obviously a much more mature country then than it was in the 17th century, but still, they were coming, and they had to make it work. One way or another, they had to make it work. So, sure, a lot of people coming today are desperate to get out of whatever hellhole they're from. But for one thing, they haven't been invited. Yeah. And by the way, this whole problem really dates back to 1965, I believe, when the new, Immigration Naturalization Act. I have to look it up. And that act it's called the Cellier-Hart Act, I think. And Emmanuel Cellier, one of the congressmen who sponsored it, He had been in Congress for something like 40 years, and basically had spent his entire time in Congress trying to get the Immigration Naturalization Act passed. You might want to look into this, for some reason, he really wanted America to change its immigration policy. And they specifically said at the same time, people were worried. They actually said this out loud at the time. People could talk honestly back then. Opponents were worried that it would change the demographic makeup of the United States. And the proponents of the act were like, no, or of the bill at that time, were like, no, it won't change the demographics. And of course, that's exactly what it's done. So basically, that act opened up non-European immigration in the United States. Before then, non-European immigration was very strictly limited. So immigration from countries other than European countries. And now we have the results today that you see. And America is a completely different place, and the demographics have changed considerably. And of course, if you mention this, people will start calling you racist and all that. But the results are the results. And now we have all sorts of problems with immigration. So I don't agree with Vivek that immigration is a symptom of the problem. No, it is one of the causes. But of course, fixing that problem will not fix everything. And yes, there are other problems. This kind of disgust and this self-hating, American self-hatred, and especially, this self-hating whites and all that sort of thing is just over the top. That does need to be addressed. But that's basically propaganda, and that can be turned around very quickly. So let me know what you think. Actually, let's play for a couple more minutes.
That literally every high school senior has to vest fully into their citizenship. Obviously, the government can't come knocking on your door or censor you from speaking no matter who you are. But if you want the privileges of citizenship, if you want the privilege of selecting who actually leads this country, you should know something about the country. If you're casting a vote at the ballot box, you should probably know, if you're casting a vote for president, what branch of government the U.S. president actually leads. I don't think that's too much to ask. I think you should probably know who wrote the Federalist Papers. And both of those, by the way, are questions on the naturalization exam, the 100-question pool that they draw from, which I think should actually draw from far more knowledge of the country than we demand even today. So that's not a one-size-fits-all, panacea, but it's an example of the kind of thing we need to think about to cultivate civic duty in this country. Do I favor a mandatory draft? No, I don't. The libertarian in me would never allow for me to compel or have a government that compels you to serve, because in a certain sense, it's not even service then. But is the spirit of people who serve their country and actually gain allegiance to their country through service something we need more of in this country? Yeah, I think so, actually. And I think we also need to restore a government that people feel inspired to swear that allegiance to. Right now, as I said earlier, the people we elect to run the government, they're not running the government. They're not engaged in public service. They're engaged in self-service. So when you see congressmen effectively lining their pockets or bureaucrats lining their pockets versus adopting simple policies that most Americans agree with, like the idea that you should not be trading stocks as a congressman or a senator or a bureaucrat. Why is that serving the interests of the American people? Answer, it's not. Implementing things like term limits, shutting down large swaths of the federal bureaucracy, returning that money like a dividend to the American taxpayer. That loyalty is a two-way relationship, right? The reason citizens don't have a loyalty to the country, one of the reasons is that the people who lead the country don't have their exclusive loyalty to our own citizens either. I mean, I went to places like the South Side of Chicago during the campaign. I went back to Chicago more recently. I went to mostly minority neighborhoods. We were in a mostly black bar that I happened to be hanging out at, meeting some folks. They came up to me and said, hey, I'd have voted for you, and I'm going to vote for Trump this year. I said, how do you usually vote? He said, mostly Democrat. Number one issue on this guy's mind was actually Ukraine. He could not understand why we're actually sending over hundreds of billions of dollars more to Ukraine. I didn't get to his views on the surveillance state, but I suspect he might have agreed with me on that one too. And so I think that part of what we're missing in this country is it's this downward spiral where, because the elected leaders of this country have abandoned their loyalty to the citizens of this country have in turn begun to abandon some of their loyalty to the country.
Well, he makes some good points. I agree. I agree about Ukraine. Not our fight, not our war. Sorry, you're going to have to sort it out yourself. And, I would say the same about Israel and the multiple fronts and the war it wants to wage against Iran. Not our problem. You don't make it our problem. And what else? Yeah, surveillance state. Yeah, absolutely. It's, ever since 9/11 and the implementation of the Patriot Act and TSA, Homeland Security, all that, that's just insane. You know, we all know where that leads. And the problem is these things never get undone. You know, oh yeah, it's terror attack. We got to do what's necessary to keep us safe. Okay, it's over 20 years later. You know, are we any safer? Okay, let's dismantle all this now. Oh, it just never gets done. So yeah, there is an insane amount of bureaucracy, government overreach, surveillance, all sorts of things need to be dismantled en masse, as far as I'm concerned, wholesale. And Vivek is right about that. I agree with him on that stuff. So let me know what you guys think. Looks like it was an interesting conversation between Matt Walsh and Vivek Ramaswamy. In the meantime, like and subscribe really helps me grow the channel and continue making content for you.